War with Mexico. All right, now listen up. After he was inaugurated in as president, President Polk really wanted the United States to acquire this whole vast area stretching from Texas to the Pacific Ocean. He had this in his sights. All the land from Texas to the Pacific he wanted for the United States. Now, he wasn't a warmonger. He actually tried to acquire this area of land by peaceful means. So what he did in November of 1845 is he sent a fellow by the name of John Slidell to Mexico to try to negotiate the purchase of that land from the Mexican government. So again, after his inauguration, President James K. Polk had set his sights on acquiring the land stretching from Texas to the Pacific Ocean, which would be basically the present-day states of New Mexico and Arizona and California. And he tried to acquire that by peaceful means because in November of 1845 he sent a fellow by the name of John Slidell to Mexico, and Slidell was directed to offer the Mexican government payment for that land area we know as New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Well, when Slidell went to Mexico, the Mexican government wouldn't even meet with him, let alone negotiate any possible sale. They wouldn't even meet with him. So he went back to Washington, D.C.
What year was that?
1845, November of 1845, President Polk sent John Slidell to Mexico. He was directed to offer the Mexican government payment for that land area we now know as New Mexico, Arizona, and California. And the Mexican government chose not even to meet with Slidell, let alone negotiate. So he went back to Washington, D.C. President Polk was very disappointed. He wanted this land area badly for the United States. And his feeling was, I tried peaceful means to secure this territory, but now I'm willing to go to war for it. So this whole issue of the war with Mexico all had to do with the land grab that President Polk wanted to pull off. Now sometimes if you want a war, what do you have to do?
Start it.
You have to do something to kind of light the fuse, okay? And some historians believe what Polk did was kind of a setup to set the Mexican government up and provoke them into a war, or provoke us to give reasons why we should declare war. So what President Polk did is he ordered military troops under the command of General Zachary Taylor, and he ordered them to the north bank of the Rio Grande River. So in what some historians believe to be a setup, President Polk ordered troops under the command of General Zachary Taylor to occupy the north bank of the Rio Grande River. Now, take a look up here. The Rio Grande River is the border between what? Right, so if he's going to have Zachary Taylor's troops stand fast on the northern side of the Rio Grande, what he's doing is he's setting up basically an opportunity for Mexican forces to cross the river and enter land that belongs now to who? The United States, because we brought him in as a state, right? So Polk orders General Taylor to stand fast at the Rio Grande River, and if any Mexican troop movement comes across the Rio Grande, they were to report that back to him. In other words, if Mexican troops breached the United States border, Polk wanted to know. Okay, so I'll repeat that again. In what some historians believe to be a setup, President Polk ordered troops under the command of General Zachary Taylor to stand fast at the north bank of the Rio Grande River. That's the river that separates Mexico from Texas. President Polk ordered General Taylor to stand fast there, and report any Mexican troop movement across the Rio Grande into the American state of Texas. Well, Taylor and his troops stood fast for nearly 5 months. And finally, the Mexican troops took the bait and breached the border between the Rio Grande River and Texas. But they stood fast there for 5 months. And finally, Mexican troops took the bait. So, as a result of Mexican troops crossing the Rio Grande into American state, on May 9th of 1846, Polk asked Congress to declare war on Mexico. On May 9th of 1846, President Polk asked Congress to declare war on Mexico.
Why would the Mexicans have any reason to cross the Rio Grande?
You know what, it's hard to say why they did. You know, I don't know why they did. We did. I think that they still had a hard time, I think, Pudge, realizing that that was no longer their territory. And I don't know why, I don't know the answer to that. But evidently Polk thought they would. But they waited 5 months before they did. Well, on May 9th, Polk asked Congress to declare war on Mexico. On May 13th, just 4 days later, Congress officially declared war on the country of Mexico. Now, how does a Congress declare war officially? Anybody know how that works specifically? The House and the Senate vote. Now, is everybody going to vote, yea or nay? Matter of fact, getting ahead of ourselves, Montana Congresswoman Jeanette Rankin was the only member of the Senate or the Congress that voted against America's entrance into both World War I and World War II. And she was the only one to vote against America's entrance into World War II after Pearl Harbor. So everybody gets to vote. Now, during this vote to declare war on Mexico, there were obviously some members of Congress that believed that President Polk was deliberately doing this for a land grab, to grab land. Okay, that he had provoked the war just so they could add that new territory into the United States. And because they didn't think that was right, some members of Congress voted against the declaration of war. But what does it take? 2/3 majority. Okay? Guess who that congressman was that voted against entrance into the Mexican War? Familiar name, really familiar name.
J.D. Sloat.
Who?
J.D. Sloat.
No, a bit more familiar than that, more famous than that. What? More famous than that. Maybe one of the most famous people you've heard about him since you were in first grade. The story. Abraham Lincoln is right. Very good, dear. So one notable congressman from Illinois who opposed the war with Mexico was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was one. Now, even though the Mexican government is going to be outnumbered militarily by the United States, they thought they could win. What would make them think they could win despite the fact that they were outnumbered? There were two things that made them think they could win. What do you need to have a good war? You got to have good directions. You have to have good
Officers?
military leaders. So one reason why Mexico thought they could defeat the Americans, although they were much more populated, is that they felt they had better military leaders. And that may have been true, I don't know. They also thought that someone would come to their aid. Who'd they think would come to their aid? Great Britain. They did. They thought they could defeat the Americans. They were confident and hoped that Great Britain would come to their aid. Well, the problem was the Mexicans did not have the necessary military power to defeat the Americans, and Great Britain did not come to their aid. So this was a sort of a mismatch from the start. Now bear with me a little bit. We're going to kind of go through this. We're not going to spend a lot of time on specific battles, but basically what happened is the United States Armed Forces operated in two different areas during the Mexican War. There's two areas they operated. One was Upper California and New Mexico, and the other was south of the Rio Grande River. So the two places that the American military operated during the Mexican War were Upper California and New Mexico, and also they operated south of the Rio Grande River, which means they were in where? Mexico, okay? So, the armed forces of the United States operated in two different areas, Upper California and New Mexico, and they also operated south of the Rio Grande River. So I'm just going to talk about some different victories that the Americans have in the Mexican War. Now, Upper California fell without a struggle. The Americans had no trouble taking Upper California, and that happened on July 7th of 1846. July 7th of 1846, when Commodore J.D. Sloat of the United States Navy landed naval forces at Monterey. And I'm talking about the Monterey in California. In that area, yeah. So, Upper California fell to the Americans without a struggle. On July 7th of 1846, Commodore J.D. Sloat of the United States Navy landed naval forces at Monterey, and I mean the Monterey in California. Also, in Upper California, a captain by the name of John C. Fremont, along with Commodore Robert Stockton, led American forces south from Monterey and captured present-day Los Angeles. So along with J.D. Sloat's victory at Monterey, Captain John C. Fremont and Commodore Robert Stockton took American forces moving south from Monterey and captured present-day Los Angeles.
So these guys are doing off
Yeah, these are, the point of this, talking about Sloat and Fremont and Stockton, is they capture Monterey and Los Angeles very easily, which gave them control of Upper California, okay? Now, at the same time these guys are assaulting Upper California, Brigadier General S.W. Kearny left Fort Leavenworth on the Missouri River and marched towards Mexico. So at the same time they're fighting in Upper California, Brigadier General S.W. Kearny left Fort Leavenworth, which is on the Missouri River, and marched his troops toward Mexico. Now, he wasn't going to go into Mexico, but he captured what other area they wanted? New Mexico. So what he did is he captured Santa Fe, and when he captured Santa Fe, he won control of present-day New Mexico, and then he continued to Southern California and won in San Diego. So they have basically taken all of California and New Mexico during this siege. So, at the same time, fighting's going on in Upper California, Brigadier General S.W. Kearny left Fort Leavenworth on the Missouri River. He marches towards Mexico. His forces capture Santa Fe, which gained control of present-day New Mexico, and then he took his troops to Southern California and won in San Diego. Does that Kearny sound familiar to you? Ever been to Sheridan or Story? There's a Fort Kearny, right? Put two and two together.
About Fort Cook.
Same one.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, we're talking about the area now south of the Rio Grande River, right? And on May 8th and May 9th of 1846, who was already on the move? What happened on May 9th, 1846.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, Houston.
What happened on May, we just talked about, what happened on May 9th of 46?
Uh,
Polk asked Congress to declare war. Well, where was General Taylor at the time?
Right on the.
North of Rio Grande. What does he do? Really starts moving even before the war is being declared. And on May 8th and 9th, he wins victories in Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma on May 8th and 9th of 1846. So he actually is assaulting those two areas while we're deciding if we're going to declare war. In response to what? Why is he doing this before we declare war? Well, because of why though? What was Taylor waiting for? He was waiting for Mexican troops to breach the Rio Grande and come into Texas. That was their, quote, retaliation for that breach of the Rio Grande River. And what happened on May 8th and May 9th of 1846, after the Mexican troops crossed into Texas, Zachary Taylor counterattacked and won victories at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. So he was making his move prior to the declaration of war and justified it how? They breached the United States. So they're already making their move into Mexico. Well, Taylor goes from Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma and he captures Monterrey, Mexico, spelled a little bit differently, in September of 1846. So Taylor's moving south, first capturing Palo Alto, then Resaca de la Palma, and then Monterrey, Mexico in September of 1846. And then in February of 1847, guess who Taylor defeats at Buena Vista? Who does he defeat there? Santa Anna, the Mexican army, and Santa Anna at Buena Vista. So in February of 1847, Taylor continues his march into Mexico, and he defeats Mexican forces under the direction of Santa Anna at Buena Vista. So how are the Mexicans doing there, Dominic? Bad. They're losing battle after battle. But they will continue to fight. They're tough old birds. So victory after victory after victory south of the Rio Grande by General Taylor. You'd think that these Mexican forces would quit, but they did not. They continued to fight. What does President Polk want to capture to end the Mexican War? What's he got to capture?
Probably like Mexico City.
Mexico City, the capital. Very good. So when President Polk seen these victories, he orders a third American expedition to advance against Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. And the man that will lead this expedition will be General Winfield Scott. General Winfield Scott. And he'll come back into some discussion a little bit later as well. So President Polk then orders a third expedition, American expedition, to advance against Mexico City, the capital of Mexico, and the man that will lead this American expedition will be General Winfield Scott. And he will command United States Marines. And he will land those United States Marines near Veracruz on the Gulf of Mexico. So, led by General Winfield Scott, an American expedition including United States Marines will land near Veracruz on the Gulf of Mexico. And what are they going to do from Veracruz? They're going to march straight to Mexico City and defeat any forces they need to along the way. Now, there was a really long mountainous road that led from Veracruz to Mexico City. A very long and mountainous road. And you can imagine that the Mexican troops fought hard every step of the way from Veracruz to Mexico City. So all along, this long mountainous road from Veracruz to Mexico City, the Americans would be contested bitterly by Mexican forces. Every foot of ground is going to be earned. They called this long mountainous road that led from Veracruz to Mexico City, it was called the Halls of Montezuma. The Halls of Montezuma. This road had been named after an Aztec emperor in early history who used the very same route when he conquered Mexico. So again, Winfield Scott will lead an expeditionary force including United States Marines. They will land at Veracruz on the Gulf of Mexico, and they will travel from Veracruz to the capital of Mexico City along a long mountainous road known as the Halls of Montezuma. Now, battle after battle after battle was fought, but finally on September 14th of 1847, American troops captured the Mexican capital of Mexico City. So after battle, all hardly fought, on September 14th, 1847, American troops entered Mexico City as victors. And what military group was most responsible for that victory? Marines. You ever heard the Marine Corps hymn? From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. That's where it comes from. That's the Marine Corps fight. It started in the halls of Montezuma. Shores of Tripoli refers to what? World War II. So Marines have had a great reputation of fighting the toughest battles, and it started with the halls of Montezuma.